We have Ken Pomeroy back with us, one of the great gurus in the college basketball analytics space. I think he's been kind enough to join us each of the last couple of years and back now for a third consecutive year in San Diego. Ken, always appreciate your time. We had someone on the midday show today that didn't realize that Ken Pom is a person, right? Ken Pomeroy, that's you. Your site is Ken Pom. How often does that come up that people don't realize that like it's an individual doing the work that you're collecting on your site?
Yeah, it comes up surprisingly often. I mean, I don't know how people expect the the ratings to get made. It just doesn't come out of thin air. Like there does have to be a person on the other end, and you are talking to that guy.
All right, so Ken Pomeroy with us.
You're a real person.
He's real. It's not AI, even in 2024. Ken Pomeroy with us right now on John and Jim. All right, as you know, the Mountain West the last couple of years has been really good. I mean, they've had 4 teams in the NCAA tournament in 22, and then in 23. We could be trending for more than that in 2024. Even with the success of the last couple of years, are you surprised that the league is even better than it's been recently?
I would say no. I mean, I think very clearly established themselves as the best league outside of the so-called power conferences, and all the programs that are in the running are programs that I think have had pretty sustainable success over the recent history. I mean, the surprises maybe a team like Utah State, who completely flips its roster and has a new coach, like that is unusual and really unprecedented in college basketball history for a team to be this good with a completely new roster. But in general, I think the other programs have been pretty stable, in terms of their coaching staffs and personnel, and so it's not too surprising that those top 6 teams in the league have had the success they've had this year.
And with the Mountain West Conference being as deep as it is this year, how wide open is this Mountain West Conference tournament in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, it should be a lot of fun. I mean, the top 6 teams are very evenly matched, and you throw UNLV in there, which is they're causing problems for those top 6 teams on a pretty regular basis, and obviously having the event in their building is a little bit of a boost for them. So yeah, it's going to be really fun because good luck predicting who's going to win that. It's going to be, especially from the quarterfinals on, there's going to be a bunch of close games that come down to the final possession, and it should be one of the better conference tournaments around.
Don't you typically do like that algorithm where the predictions are showing the percent chance that someone can win a league? Could you envision where there's like 5, even 6 teams? I know they'd have to play an extra game in the Mountain West tournament, but could there be like 5 teams with a 10-15% chance of winning the Mountain West tournament?
Yeah, something like that. I mean, normally, I think you look around the various conference tournaments and like the favorites tend to be, there's a few conference tournaments where the favorites over 50%. Yeah. There's a bunch where they're like between 30 and 50. And, obviously the way the ratings shake out right now, the Aztecs should be the favorite in that event, but I don't know where they'll be at, but I would guess it would be sub 30%. They might be 25%, and, the other 5 teams splitting most of the rest of the 75%. So, it's going to be, pretty much up for grabs.
Ken Pomeroy with us right now, John and Jim, San Diego Sports 760. What do the analytics and the predictive metrics say about San Diego State, where they are today compared to, not that you have this off the top of your head, but even a year ago? I feel like maybe some of these metrics, including Ken Pom, has San Diego State maybe even in a better spot today than they might have been a year ago. Not to say that predicts the run that they made a year ago, but San Diego State has had obviously a very nice season to this point.
No question. Yeah, I mean, the metrics are pretty similar. We've seen this from Dutcher coach teams now. I mean, very similar to the Fisher coach teams, a very strong defense, and the offense kind of comes along for the ride. But this year, the offense is a little bit better. I mean, in particular, the 2-point shooting is better. I mean, ranking 80th in the country, which is really the best since the 2020 team, which mythologically won the national title, I think. Probably in everybody's mind out there. But so they're a little bit better positioned than they were last year. Obviously, as you mentioned, I mean, there's a lot of other factors that go into making a deep run in the tournament, but they're certainly just as well positioned as they were last year to surprise. I don't know if you're going to surprise anyone, but certainly to make a deep run.
It's interesting in the Mountain West, as you know, because correct me if I'm wrong, you live in the West and you're a Wyoming fan, aren't you? I remember that from our conversations.
A Wyoming alum and a Wyoming fan, for better or for worse.
Okay, so no, I'm glad we can mention that because like I'm looking for your 30,000 foot view on San Diego State. But like speaking of like the elevation that is the Mountain West, which makes it somewhat unique, I don't believe your algorithm takes into account elevation, but there are other metrics around college basketball that do. Is there a way for a metric, in your opinion, to measure the impact of elevation without like over punishing teams for playing at elevation? Because Wyoming, for example, plays, all of their home games at elevation. There are metrics that punish them just for doing that alone, right?
So, yeah, I mean, I think we should name names here, and I believe it's the BPI that seems to do this. And I would say, like, in a more general sense, I don't know if they're necessarily punishing for elevation, but they are accounting for home court advantage. And so, Wyoming and Air Force, Colorado State, Nevada, these teams that, New Mexico, these teams that play at elevation tend to have, higher home court advantage than most of the rest of the country. And so, so that's what the BPI is doing. I don't know if they overpunish teams. I do know that, I've looked at this myself, and I have like team-specific home court advantage that I've computed. I don't include that in my ratings, but I probably should, because the teams that have those higher home court advantages, they tend to underperform my predictions at home, and or overperform at home and underperform on the road. And that may explain some of the struggles for these other Mountain West teams once they get into the tournament that we've seen, last 2 years. I mean, really, with the exception of the Aztecs, the conference as a whole ends up kind of falling on its face. And it could be because they are like slightly overrated in some of these metrics that, don't account for the fact that they do have strong home court advantages based on elevation.
Speaking of the home court advantages, now, of course, San Diego State's literally at sea level. We're in San Diego. Some of these others, like Wyoming, is 7,000 feet plus above sea level. Does the Mountain West, or do some of the schools in the Mountain West enjoy some of the best home court advantages in the nation, or not? Like, how do they compare to other dominant home venues in the nation?
Right. I typically, I think if you look over the last 20 years, look at home court record in conference play, I believe the Mountain West is number one.
Wow.
This is not something I've looked at like this year, but when I have looked at it in the past, that is the case. And so I think to me, there was always two things going on there. One is the elevation, although obviously you have cases where like Colorado State's playing at Wyoming, and that's not, nobody's benefiting from elevation there. But also the travel is not terribly easy. I mean, this is a conference that covers a lot of ground. And so, you don't have like short 10-minute bus trips for some of these games like you might have in some of the other leagues. So both of those issues, I think, come into play. And it makes it really difficult to win on the road. It really hasn't been the case this year. I think home court winning percentage, I'm just looking it up, is 58% in Mountain West play. So that's pretty average. But, there's kind of random variability from year to year. I mean, this year's been especially unusual in that Air Force has won 2 games on the road, which and none at home, which is pretty rare for them. But generally, yes, Mountain West has the best home court advantage, or the strongest home court advantage in the country.
Ken Pomeroy with us right now, John and Jim. This is more John, by the way, Ken. Jim, this is my forte. Jim,
I just let him go.
He just lets me go. I just need a few minutes with Ken Pomeroy. It might be John and Ken come 2025.
Probably.
We'll see. We'll talk to the bosses. There's been some chatter, Ken, on social media. Like, it's been kind of unique. I've been tagged into it about like the Mountain West against the ACC. Like, it's never happened in the history of my time doing this, but there's been this Mountain West ACC chatter. You run the numbers. How does the Mountain West this year compare to the ACC?
Yeah, the ACC is actually ranked a little higher this year in terms of overall strength. I mean, I think if you're, there's various ways you can rate conference strength, and I guess the simplest would be like tournament bids, and the Mountain West is going to win that battle. I think we understand, but right now the ACC is the 5th toughest conference, and the Mountain West is 7th, and there's not like a huge gap actually between 5, 6, and 7. 6 is the Pac-12, by the way. So if the Mountain West did have a strong NCAA tournament, they actually probably could catch the Pac-12 and maybe even the ACC. But yeah, they're just a little bit behind the ACC. I will, like, it is an interesting phenomenon that like there is definitely a group of hardcore ACC fans out there, and I'm someone who actually grew up in ACC territory, and I don't remember this kind of like sheer fandom for a conference. And you root for your teams, and then you kind of root for the rest of the league. But wow, there are some very vociferous people out there regarding the ACC and defending its honor, which obviously has, I think, an objective view would show has slipped a bit here over the last decade.
Yeah, there's no question about it. There's an interesting conversation that's played out among Mountain West circles, Ken, which is about should the league remain at 18 conference games, which it is right now, or should they go true round robin? They're like the Big East with the 11 teams. So you could go 20. So where do you weigh in on that? Again, you crunch the numbers. Is it of benefit or not? I think I know the answer. Is it of benefit or not for the Mountain West to expand its conference schedule?
So it really depends what you do with the 2 extra games, right? Like, so you can go to 20, and you're more familiar with the Mountain West schedule than I am. I assume they're trying to make it so that the top teams are playing the top teams, and we have fewer, games against, where tournament teams are playing, San Jose State and Air Force.
Yep.
And if you do that intelligently, then I think 18 is fine. Like, you don't need, Nevada playing San Jose State twice, or, playing Air Force twice. So to me, I think you're fine, in terms of like maximizing your tournament bids. I think you're fine staying at 18. You hope that the top teams take those 2 extra games and schedule intelligently. And if they do so, you have a situation like you have this year where you're going to do very well in terms of getting bids.
Ken Pomeroy with us, KenPom.com, John and Jim, San Diego Sports 760. There's always this outcry in the Mountain West. I assume it's like this nationwide, but I'm following it from like a Mountain West lens. This idea that, the officiating's terrible in the Mountain West. Now, maybe people, actually not maybe, I know people say, the officiating is whatever in college basketball. What do you see? I mean, is that a big, did you hear that? The officiating in the Mountain West, or the officiating in the ACC. I mean, this is, if it's an issue in the Mountain West, it's just an issue in college basketball in general, right?
I think it's an issue in basketball in general. Like, I just think basketball is the most difficult sport to officiate. You have 3 people trying to officiate 10 much younger, more athletic people in live action. Like, you don't have, in a lot of cases, you don't have the ability to think about calls. If you need to make a foul call, you need to decide right now, was what I saw a foul or not? And the best officials, I think, by and large, are going to do a great job, and they're going to get in the best position and get the best angles, but they still get fooled from time to time. And obviously on a Saturday afternoon where there's 140 games going on, like, your random, Air Force CSU game is not going to have the best officials. It's going to have the officials further down the line, and you're just going to get a worse quality game called. So, I mean, it is, I there actually was a time where I wanted to do like kind of a blog piece on, finding tweets from fans of every league saying, claiming that their league's officials were the worst. And everybody feels that way. But especially now, officials are, much more national than they were 10 years ago. Like, leagues don't have their own set of officials. Well, I know that the same, top Western officials are working Mountain West games, but, all the top Mountain West officials are doing Pac-12 games. They're doing random WAC games in the middle of the week. Like, they're working different leagues. So, I mean, it's definitely not a feature of basketball. It's a bug. It's just really difficult to officiate. That's why we have crazy reviews at the end of games. But it's just, it's just the way the game is. It's a really tough game to officiate.
Yeah, there's no question about it. Ken, a couple of more before you go. Just regarding, this time of year, Selection Sunday, and the selection committee's job of choosing like the best at-large candidates. Obviously, the automatic qualifiers win their leagues, but then they're tasked with finding the best, whatever it is, 36 or so at-large candidates. Is there something the committee, in your opinion, gets wrong still? I mean, it's much more metrically oriented today than it was, let's say, 10 years ago today. But if you were choosing the best at-large candidates, is there something you would do the committee doesn't do to make that selection?
Well, yeah, I mean, I controversially, I do support definitely a more objective approach. Really just a purely objective approach would be, something I would support, just in terms of quantifying. We know how hard it is to beat, X-ranked team on the road or X-ranked team at home. We can give teams credit for those achievements, and we can have a much fairer process. What the committee gets wrong is they really do not know how to quantify like a situation like Indiana State, who is beating a lot of okay teams on the road consistently. And they obviously at this time of year do not get the chance to play, top 30 teams. So, but they are able to beat a lot of okay teams on the road and a lot of okay teams at home. And they're very consistent in doing that. And that's actually very difficult to do. It'd be very difficult for, San Diego State to go on the road to Illinois State or Southern Illinois or teams like that and win 14 or 15 of those games. And the committee just consistently undervalues those kind of achievements. And so, yeah, I would definitely favor a more objective approach that would properly account for that.
Ken, how do you see the top of the college basketball this year compared to a year ago? Again, we understand the randomness of the NCAA tournament, but a year ago, I want to say there was no top 3 seed in the Final Four. I think that's right. I think UConn was a 4. So, that's obviously a little bit of an aberration or abnormal, right? A year ago, what are your expectations? I mean, how do you see the top of the sport, the top 10 today, as opposed to the top 10, let's say, a year ago?
It's, if you look at my ratings, it's fairly similar. Right? It might be slightly stronger than it was last year. I mean, the top was, I think, historically, I don't know what the word is. Mediocre is probably not fair, but it was down from what we've seen in the past 20 years. It's a little bit stronger this year. Certainly, that top 3 of Houston and Purdue and UConn has been pretty consistently the top 3 over the last month, and they're all strong teams. They're not historically strong teams. I don't know that we'll ever see historically strong teams again, just given, some of the forces that are in college basketball now that weren't there 10 or 20 years ago. But you still have very good teams. And even last year, obviously that, there was one half of the bracket that got completely blown up. Yep. But UConn as a 4 seed was, in terms of talent and ability, quite a bit stronger than your typical 4 seed. This year, they're going to be properly seeded as a 1 seed. And, so I guess to answer your question, yes, it's a little bit stronger than last year. There's still plenty of parity. There's a lot of strength in the lower seeds. Seeds 6 through 11 this year will be as strong as or as close to the top of college basketball as they've ever been. So, it should be another tournament where we're going to see quite a few upsets, more upsets than normal, I guess.
Finally, I'm just curious, you're going back a year, but San Diego State makes that run last year. You watch West Coast hoops. You see San Diego State all the time, obviously. Was the level of surprise for you, or not necessarily, because it's kind of like the lotto, like the more tickets, I mean, they're always in. They've been in a lot, and in a one and done format, at some point, maybe you're going to make a run. What was your reaction to San Diego State making a run when they did it?
Yeah, I mean, again, part of it was, I guess, the bracket got busted open to some extent. I mean, San Diego State did that a little bit on their own, but so that helped. I mean, it wasn't, obviously, if you're comparing level of surprise to, San Diego State or Miami or FAU making it, like San Diego State to me was the least surprising of that. It's some surprise, but they're obviously a well-coached team. The defense is really difficult to score on, and Lamont Butler made a fantastic play against FAU to win a game. So, you go back and look at a lot of those games are just very close, coming down to the last possession. And San Diego State was on the right end of a lot of that stuff. And so I'm not going to say I was like expecting them to make the championship game or whatever. No way. But obviously, any team out of the Mountain West, San Diego State seemed to be the team that was built more to go deep into the tournament.
No doubt about it. Ken, always enjoy it. We appreciate you hopping on here in San Diego. Obviously, a lot of Aztec fans with the flagship. People are excited off last year, and of course, what they've done here this year as well. Mm-hmm. And again, for our listeners, you need to check it out. It is an amazing resource for college basketball fans. Ken Pom, KenPom.com. March is almost here. Ken, appreciate you doing it. Thanks so much.
All right. Thanks for having me on, guys.
All right. Good stuff.